before the world knew her as the author of To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee was a little girl walking the dusty streets of Monroeville, Alabama. Her father, Amasa Coleman Lee, was an attorney, a thoughtful, principled man who spent his days inside the old courthouse at the center of town. And whenever he could, he took his daughter with him. She would sit quietly in the courtroom, with her small feet dangling from the wooden benches, listening as the real-life stories unfolded. Stories of wrongdoing, consequences, mercy, and judgment. She was fascinated, not simply with crime itself, but with people. Why did they do what they did? What drove them? The courthouse became kind of a classroom for her. Those early days left their mark on her, planting a lifelong curiosity about morality, evil, and justice. For a time, she even followed in her father's footsteps, studying at the University of Alabama School of Law. Though she ultimately chose the path of writing instead of practicing law, the love of the courtroom never left her. Her childhood friend, Truman Capote, shared her fascination with the complexities of human nature. Years later, Harper would help Capote research what became In Cold Blood, traveling to Kansas, interviewing witnesses, and putting together the story. And then years later, Harper Lee heard about a strange case unfolding in Alabama, filled with suspicious deaths, rumors of voodoo, faith, fraud, and courtroom drama. And she felt that familiar pull once again, back to the courthouse. She traveled the back roads of Alabama, studied testimony, interviewed witnesses, and gathered the pieces of the story that seemed almost too strange to believe. Though Harper Lee never completed the manuscript she envisioned, her research was later uncovered and explored in the book Furious Hours by Casey Sett. And here is the story that captured the imagination of Harper Lee herself, The Reverend.
I'm Darlene.
And I'm Melody.
This is Hard Times and True Crimes.
Well, we've had some milestones in our family. My niece, Hannah, she finished her crucible last weekend and is officially a U.S. Marine.
That's amazing. Congratulations, Hannah.
Yeah, and then my nephew, Noah, he's fighting in the UFC now. He had a fight that he won last weekend. So we were so proud of both of them.
Where did he fight?
It was somewhere up in Michigan.
That's so cool. Wow. Congratulations, Noah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
It's been a crazy week. Well, a crazy month.
You have a crazy life.
I do. I really do. So when all this stuff was going on with Israel and they shut down travel, my mom was there.
Mm-hmm.
And she was there experiencing all of the bombing, and she had to go down and get into the bunkers. And
several times, right?
Several times. She spent some time with some of the IDF soldiers,
mm-hmm.
and they ended up being able to get out through Egypt. Then she was able to see like the pyramids, and she has the coolest
wild
pictures. Yeah.
And she ended up on a podcast.
She did. And she is home now and grounded from ever traveling abroad again. But yeah, so that was crazy. But then our son Elijah, he's in the Marine Corps and he has been deployed since August. He just had a baby in February, and he was getting ready to come home in the beginning of April. And now he just found out that he's not coming home until probably July. So that really stinks. But
yeah,
I'm telling you, my daughter-in-law, Journey, is the perfect military wife.
Wow. Well, good for her. I wouldn't be, but good for her.
Well, she's got Eliza Jane.
Yeah.
She is only just a little over a year old. And then she's got the new baby, and she's by herself and thriving. Like,
wow.
She does such a good job.
Way to go, Journey.
Yes, I'm really proud of her. But we get to go see Lily next weekend, and so we're all really excited about that.
Good.
Yeah, a lot of life.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm excited to tell you this story.
I'm excited to hear it.
I'm going to get started. So people were packed like sardines into the courthouse on these hard wooden benches. In September of 1977, it was still hot as fire, and the courtroom air condition wasn't working. Harper Lee was one of the spectators in the courthouse. She was researching for her new book, People recognized her name, but they didn't know her face. And so she was able to go in there and be inconspicuous. She lived in Manhattan, but she came back to Monroeville, Alabama, where she had been raised every summer and sometimes more often. It was still home to her. Monroeville was only about 150 miles from Alexander City, where the trial was taking place. Do you remember the story that I did about Earl Dennison?
Yes, that was your first one, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And do you remember Hank Williams stayed on Lake Martin?
Oh, yeah.
When he was riding and trying to dry out? Well, she stayed on Lake Martin when she was researching this book.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yes. 17 years had passed since she had published To Kill a Mockingbird, and more than a decade had passed since she'd helped her friend, Truman Capote, research and report on the Kansas murders that became In Cold Blood.
Was that the Clutter family?
It was,
Okay,
yeah.
yes.
So now she was ready to get to work. The spectators that day were there for the trial of a man who had shot a Reverend, Willie Maxwell, in front of hundreds of witnesses, like 300 people. He was a black man. The murder victim was a black man. The lawyers were white, the judge was white, and the jury was white. He was charged with first-degree murder. 3 months earlier, the funeral of a 16-year-old girl, the defendant pulled out a pistol from inside his jacket and shot the Reverend Willie Maxwell 3 times in the head at very close range. I mean, he could have reached out and touched him. He was so close. Willie Maxwell, who would later become the Reverend, was born in Coosa County, Alabama on May 29th in 1925. There isn't really that much known about his early life. We know that he attended school when he could, but in farming communities, life revolved around seasons and the work that had to be done. Families in Coosa County planted corn, wheat, oats, and fished the waterways that run along the edge of the community. He only went to school for about 7 years. And in 1943, during World War II, he registered for the draft. At 18 years old, he headed off to basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia. His hair, of course, was cut. He was issued that uniform, and he maintained that clean-cut look for the rest of his life. Very neat and fixated on organization, and
I think the military can foster that in you.
Oh, yeah.
If you're already predisposed to it, it's just going to make it even more.
Definitely. I think that's what it did for him.
And that clean cut was a generation too.
Absolutely. In January of 1947, after finishing his service, he earned a Good Conduct Medal and he was honorably discharged. By the spring of 1947, he was headed back home to Coosa County. Willie was 21 years old at this time and 6'2" and weighed 180 pounds. So he was a tall drink of water. He had brown eyes, a thin, I thought, very handsome face. He wore a thin mustache that kind of gave him a distinguished look. He spoke formal. He was incredibly charming, but not in a way that would feel disingenuous.
Okay.
He just seemed very friendly. Always made sure to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and no, sir, yes, sir, that kind of thing. He just put everybody at ease that talked to him. So he had a good reputation, and everybody said that he was a very hard worker. After coming home from the military, he met a young woman named Mary Lou Edwards, and Mary Lou had grown up in Cottage Grove, another little community in Coosa County. She would have been 19 at the time, just 2 years younger than Willie, and the two became engaged. And then in the spring of 1949, they got married. Mary Lou took a job at a mill, but she also would take in other work to be able to make ends meet. She would do laundry and mending on the side. She worked hard at her job, and then she would come home and work hard some more.
As was life.
It gives me a lot of respect for women in those days. Willie worked as a sharecropper for about 5 years before going to work at a mill. It didn't take him long to get fired for laying out of work. And then he would go back and he would get fired again. What they say was that he worked very hard while he worked.
Okay, I was going to say that was a little odd because
Yes.
if he was a hard worker, why is he laying out of work?
He was a hard worker while he worked. But there was a role that he was able to keep, and that was when he became a preacher. He was known as Reverend Maxwell, and the Reverend would preach revivals all over the place, anywhere anybody would have him. And people in the community loved him. He traveled a lot. That, of course, brought back tons of memories about those old Southern tent revivals.
Oh, yes. Amen.
Yeah. I was just thinking about in the South how people participated
Yes.
in those revivals. They were emotional and expressive, and those large canvas tents would be set up in fields or beside little churches.
And I can just see them sitting out in that heat with those cardboard fans with the stick on them during those hot summers, and you're preaching hellfire and brimstone. You could almost feel the flames coming up.
But anyway, he was a good preacher. You know, he knew how to emphasize certain words and repeat certain phrases, and his voice would rise and fall at the right times. And he was just a skilled preacher.
Yeah. Good orator.
Exactly. Yes. Revival meetings were very important events in the community, and it would have been pretty unusual for both husband and wife not to attend together. But this particular night, the Reverend's wife, Mary Lou, she chose to stay home. I don't know if she was tired. It's possible she was a little bit upset. The Reverend had just been fired from his job at the mill, and that likely added stress to her already, you know, probably very full plate. She had already been working hard to help support the family, and I don't know, the uncertainty, it just would have probably weighed really heavily on her mind. But whatever the reason was, she stayed home that night, and the Reverend agreed that was fine. But he did ask her to make sure that she kept the phone line clear, and then when he was on his way home, he was going to give her a call to let her know that he was coming home. So I don't know if she was going to get up and cook for him. In 1970, though, phone lines weren't like they are today. You couldn't be on the phone and get a call. The Reverend left for the revival a little before 6 p.m. Before he left, Mary Lou's sister stopped by for a visit, and the two of them sat out on the porch talking while Mary Lou shelled peas. The revival services were known to last for hours and hours, so Mary Lou likely knew she was going to have plenty of time to make a quick visit and be back home before her husband called. So after her sister left, Mary Lou decided to drive over to visit another of her sisters, Lena Martin. She didn't stay long. She just wanted to go see her. And later that evening, when Mary Lou came back home, she noticed that her neighbor, Dorcas Anderson, was outside, and the two women talked for a few minutes, but then she told her, hey, I gotta go inside because Willie was gonna call and wanted her to make sure she answered the phone. So on his way home from the revival, the Reverend made a stop in a little town called Camp Hill, and he pulled over into a service station for some gas. He got himself a Coca-Cola, and he used the telephone so that he could call Mary Lou. But when he dialed the number, she didn't answer. So when the Reverend got back home, Mary Lou wasn't there, which was a little bit weird, but he just figured she'd probably stayed over at her sister's house or her mom's. And so at first, he really didn't give it too much thought. And it had been a really long night, and he was tired from preaching, and so fell asleep. But then at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, he got up and she still wasn't home. And he started to worry a little bit and started to make some phone calls trying to track her down. He contacted her mom, her sisters, and then eventually he also spoke with the neighbor, Dorcas, and asked if she had talked with her. Nobody had seen her, or well, nobody knew where she was. They had all seen her earlier, but the Reverend finally decided to call the police. So the police took the Reverend's statement and they started asking questions and talking to the people Mary Lou might have been in contact with the night before. They talked with family members and kind of retraced her movements and eventually went next door to talk with her neighbor, Dorcas Anderson. And that's when they learned she had actually seen Mary Lou twice that night. The first time was earlier in the evening when the two had stood outside talking for a little while. And after a bit, she went back inside and said she needed to wait for the Reverend to call. But then later that night, after 10 p.m., Mary Lou came back. And this time, something was definitely wrong. Mary Lou was shaky, told her that her husband had been in a bad car accident and had called her and asked her to come meet him in a place called New Site, which was really close to where they lived. And this detail definitely caught investigators' attention immediately because the Reverend had not told them that. Dorcas also told investigators that if he had arrived home at 11, she hadn't seen him come in. And she was one of those neighbors that she kind of saw the comings and goings of people. And she said the first time that she knew that he was home was around 2 a.m. And that's when he had called her to ask her if she'd heard anything from Mary Lou. Dorcas said she looked outside and noticed the Reverend's car and that it didn't have any damage to it. And she said that right then she told her husband that something was definitely off. When the investigators asked the Reverend about it, he said there was some kind of a misunderstanding. He had not been in any wreck, and Mary Lou had not even answered the phone, and he hadn't talked to her. But Mary Lou was still missing, and so was her car. So police began searching the roads that she would have drove down when she went to see her sister. And that would have also been the same road that the Reverend would have taken coming back home from the revival. Eventually, along Highway 22, they did find Mary Lou's 1968 Ford Fairlane sitting on the shoulder of the road. There was some minor damage to the front of it, but the car didn't look like it had been crashed or anything. The engine was still running. The headlights were still on. But inside the vehicle, they found Mary Lou's dead body.
How long after they started searching did they find her? Like, how long was that?
We'll be back after a quick break.
All right, y'all. Real quick before we get back to it. Because you keep asking, yes, we finally have podcast merch. We've got hoodies with a new design. Cozy, super comfy, and honestly way nicer than we planned, for just $35. Fair warning though, we only have sizes 2X and 3X left. But let's be honest, that oversized fit is very on trend right now, and perfect for cool mornings or porch sitting. Prefer a more fitted look? We have t-shirts in all sizes for just $20 each. Same vibe, same attitude. Grab yours, rep the show, and help support what we're building. To order, just email us at hardtimesandtruecrimes@gmail.com with what you want, your size, and your shipping address. That's hardtimesandtruecrimes@gmail.com. Now, back to the show.
I actually do not know.
Okay.
It wouldn't have been daylight.
Couldn't have been too long because
no,
she would have run out of gas probably.
It would have still been night because they were talking about how those headlights were.
Oh.
But yeah, so it was sometime in the early morning when it was still dark outside.
So within hours.
The officers were just kind of in shock by what they were seeing. Mary Lou was still sitting inside the vehicle. She had been wearing this polka dotted dress, but you couldn't even see the pattern for all the blood.
Oh.
I mean, it was horrible.
Oh, that's bad.
Her clothes were soaked. She had blood all over her arms, her hands, her chest, running down the backs of her legs. Whatever had happened to her had been really violent.
Wow.
Investigators also saw really severe injuries to her head and face. Her nose was broken. Her jaw was fractured. A piece of her ear was missing.
Oh, wow. That's brutal.
Her face was horribly swollen and bruised. It was just nasty. When the coroners examined her, they found this bruise also around her neck, along with some marks that were consistent with her having had a ligature tied around her neck.
Yeah.
So, of course, somebody had obviously tried to strangle her with some kind of a rope or a cord.
Which would be a horrible, horrible way to die.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Also, there were signs that they knew that the attack had not taken place inside the vehicle because they found leaves and dirt inside of her mouth and mixed with blood, like on the side of her face. And so they knew she'd been outside somewhere.
And then put her back in the car.
They also knew that she'd struggled with her attacker. The coroner ultimately concluded that they had tried to strangle Mary Lou outside of her vehicle and had not succeeded, and then beat and killed her.
So she fought back enough that they had to resort to something else.
Yep.
Well, good on her for trying so hard.
Yes, absolutely. Naturally, investigators are looking at the Reverend.
Yeah.
He is definitely the prime suspect at this point. Partly because of the circumstantial evidence and partly because they were digging deeper and discovering that he was basically a serial adulterer.
Oh, the Reverend.
Yes, the good Reverend. His sermons were not matching up with how he was living his life. And this was a shocker to people in the community who had really respected him. But I'm not sure why. So Mary Lou, you wonder, did she know about him having all these affairs? They were married for almost 20 years. I don't know. He had been doing it, obviously, for a long time. But that year, in January of 1972, he had gone to court to legitimize a baby and to say, yes, this is my child. Yeah.
How's he still preaching revivals?
And had the mother had her last name changed to his last name.
Oh, my gracious.
Yes.
That's wild.
And yeah, it was crazy.
How did he get away with that?
But she stayed with him because she didn't believe in divorce. And her sisters would later say that, she wouldn't have left. She wouldn't have left. He would have had to have left her.
Okay. And
not that he was trying to get her to, but.
Okay. And I think it was tolerated more back then. I think many wives tolerated that kind of behavior more so than we do now.
I think it was men in general back then were pretty domineering. They'd gone to his house to try to collect evidence, and he had burned a bunch of stuff in a fire. So, of course, they never found that ligature because they believe it was a rope. And they're pretty sure he probably burned that and the clothes that he had been wearing. Because they were probably just very bloody.
Yeah.
But thankfully, there was Mary Lou's next door neighbor, Dorcas Anderson.
Yeah, because he didn't count on her going back over and telling her.
Exactly. I'm so thankful that she did that. So her testimony was gold for the investigators because it gave them a timeline and it just let them know that she was more than likely ambushed. So in the days following Mary Lou's death, the Reverend, along with his new lawyer, Tom Radney, made arrangements for her funeral. Mary Lou was laid to rest at Peace and Goodwill Baptist Church Cemetery, which wasn't far from where they'd lived. The Reverend started taking care of things like, making sure that her last paycheck went to him.
Oh, yes.
And
all
also
those minor details.
Writing a letter to Old American Insurance Company, informing them of his wife's sudden unexpected death, describing it as the result of a car accident, and requesting the payment of $15,000 because he was the beneficiary of her life insurance. What he didn't mention was that Mary Lou's death had been ruled a murder and that he was the primary suspect, and they were just looking for any way that they could to charge him. So
I'm just to wonder, do life insurance companies always check out stories like that? Certainly they don't pay out because you get a letter like that.
Oh, no, they don't. It was like a hobby to him, apparently, collecting insurance policy.
Oh.
He had tons of them.
He knew what he was doing.
Oh, yeah. So he got this policy, this particular one from the American Insurance Company. He got that less than 2 months before. He never even made the second payment on it.
So it did pay out.
Well, yeah, it did pay out.
Wow.
It did. But they weren't going to at first. They did find out, though, he had insurance policies on his niece, one on his mother, his sisters, his nephews, the baby daughter that he had just legitimized that year. So obviously these insurance companies did everything that they could not to pay out. He had tons of life insurance policies on her. So he didn't just have the one. They later found out he had several.
Oh, man. He had a scam going for sure. He was going to cash in.
Absolutely. And they were trying not to pay out, especially with him being the main suspect in this murder. But meanwhile, his lawyer, Tom Radney, started taking legal action against the insurance companies and pushing them to pay out the policies that he'd taken out on Mary Lou. And the companies were hesitant. Of course, they didn't want to pay. And they felt like he was guilty, as would anybody who heard the circumstances of her murder. But Radney fought. He was a good attorney.
And that's how he was going to get paid too.
100%. And so he fought aggressively for the Reverend and filed lawsuit after lawsuit to force payment. And about a year after Mary Lou's death, though, the Reverend was indicted on charges of first-degree murder. They believed that Mary Lou had been lured from her home and ambushed. They also believed someone helped move her car to the location to where it was eventually discovered along Highway 22. And so Ophelia Burns entered the picture. And this was who had been romantically involved with the Reverend. In fact, her husband ended up leaving her.
Oh, she was married too.
She was married too.
It's like a little Peyton place.
Yes. And she was accused of helping set up the ambush and then helping him move Mary Lou's car after the attack. Tom Radney, his attorney, represented her too, which I thought was weird. But when the case went to trial, the Reverend was the only one who had to end up facing the jury. I guess hers got dropped. The evidence against him was definitely circumstantial, but of course, anybody that hears the details of what happened is going to strongly suspect him to be the murderer. But everything fell apart for the prosecution because when Mary Lou's neighbor, Dorcas Anderson, took the stand.
That's the part I remember most about this story.
Yes. She said that she did not remember making any of those earlier statements, and that not only had Mary Lou, she said, not come to her house the second time, she provided an alibi for the Reverend. She testified that he had come home at 11, just like he told investigators. And of course, that testimony was devastating to the prosecution's case.
I know, but when they didn't see that coming, I bet they were like beside themselves when she said that.
Well, they didn't have much without her testimony. And so, of course, the whole thing just unraveled and the jury was left with reasonable doubt.
Right. Unfortunately.
Exactly. And so after the testimony, he was found not guilty and walked out of the courtroom a free man. Not only had he convinced her to change her testimony, just 4 months after his acquittal, he married her.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Now, I guess you remember me saying that she had been married.
Yep.
So her husband, Abram Anderson, had been diagnosed with ALS. We know what a devastating disease that is. And it takes away a person's ability to really do anything for themselves. He had become wheelchair bound. And Dorcas was only in her 20s at the time and had 2 small children and was his full-time caregiver. The Reverend and Dorcas, they'd already known each other. They were probably all close friends and neighbors. And he probably came over trying to explain himself. And I 100% believe he was a smooth talker.
Oh, yeah.
And I really think in the end, she probably was like, I'm so sorry. I misunderstood. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I think he probably really had her thinking.
He got to her.
Feeling bad. Yes. And, you know, then he would talk to her about his grief and losing his wife. And she could relate because she was going through her own grief and her husband's illness. I don't know when the relationship started. I just know that some people are skilled at influencing other people. And the prisons are full of them. They're skilled at what they do.
Con men, yeah.
Yeah. So Dorcas's husband, like I said, he was in a wheelchair, and his illness had gotten so bad that he was eventually admitted to a VA hospital. Doctors had high hopes that he was going to live for several more years. But just 3 months after being admitted into this hospital at 35 years old, Abram Anderson died. And there was a lot of speculation on how he died because the Reverend would go visit him. And they didn't do an autopsy because
He had the ALS.
he had ALS, and that was kind of going to be his fate anyway. So
It definitely leaves it open to question.
it really does, especially with how quick their relationship progressed. And Dorcas was just 27 years old, and the Reverend was 46. And from the outside, if you didn't already have his background, it would have looked like two people just helping each other kind of move through grief. Around this time, people were really actually starting to believe that the Reverend was involved in voodoo. So in that part of Alabama, beliefs about voodoo or hoodoo, it wasn't really that unusual. It was almost like the Appalachian folklore.
Yes.
But it was around voodoo. So, they could be church going Christians, but they had these beliefs about laying tricks or curses or influence on people. Even people who attended church regularly would tell their children the hoodoo man was going to get them if they stayed out late. They would threaten to lay tricks on their husband or wives if they cheated on them, or I don't know. There was just a lot of that mixed in. So when the Reverend was found not guilty, then now he's married this young, beautiful woman. Her husband suddenly died. And there were lots of rumors. I'm not going to say he wasn't involved.
Even if the rumors got out of hand, there's a reason for that they got out of hand. I mean, his reputation now precedes him, and
100%.
If you've lived your life in such a manner,
yes,
then of course people are going to think those things about you.
That's right. And so stories started spreading that the Reverend carried charms, powders, roots that he used to control situations. Others claimed he hung chickens upside down in his pecan tree in the yard. Others thought that he won Dorcas over by nailing these nails in a tree. But anyways, I don't know how true the rumors were, but in a small town.
I want to say something. I suspect that he probably liked the rumors.
Oh, yeah.
And so he probably played them up and made them bigger. You know what I'm saying? That's just my suspicion about him.
The crazy thing is that he was still preaching in some churches.
That's what I don't understand. Who's letting this guy preach?
Now, not local. Local churches were not having him. So it was like outside communities. And I think that was just people who genuinely just couldn't see him doing something like that. They just didn't believe it. But
yeah, there's got to be some discernment here. Like, who's going to let him behind the pulpit if you're not living your life beyond reproach? Even if there's the shadow of a doubt, why are you letting him behind the pulpit? I don't know.
Even the fact that he has a child.
An illegitimate child.
Right. Yeah. Just because he legitimized it, don't make it legitimate.
Even if you don't think he killed his wife, you can look at all the other stuff.
Yeah, he was not living a godly life.
No.
It's crazy. He was married, and so Dorcas had 2 sons with her first husband, Abram, and he adopted those 2 sons, and then she got pregnant, and things were going okay for them. One day, though, he got a call from his brother, JC. He had been arrested for drunk driving. JC was 52 years old and just a sweet guy. I think he had a problem with alcohol. But, there are mean drunks and then there are nice ones. And from everything, people said JC was just sweet. He wasn't known for causing trouble and just, I don't know, a good guy.
Like Otis.
Yes. After his arrest, he was given a $300 fine, and his brother, the Reverend, paid it off for him. JC was scheduled to appear back in court, but he would never make that court date. An anonymous caller reported that a pedestrian had been struck by a vehicle near where Highway 22 met Highway 9, which was really close to where they all lived. When the police arrived, they found JC's body. And at first, they said he had been hit by a car, but when they examined the scene and his body, there were no obvious injuries consistent with him being hit by a car.
You know what I'm wondering?
What?
Does he have life insurance on him?
Oh, of course he does. Of course he does.
Okay.
Now, he did smell very strongly of alcohol, but he drank a lot. But when his blood was tested, the results showed like a crazy, insane high level that they said they couldn't even believe somebody could have drank that much alcohol. That's how high his levels were. But there was nothing there. And so his death certificate ultimately listed the cause of his death, a heart attack brought on by alcohol poisoning. But of course, they did have questions, investigators. Sure. They just didn't see a clear explanation for how he could have consumed that much alcohol on his own. And then there was the fact that their good Reverend had a life insurance policy on his brother. By this point, the insurance companies were becoming concerned, I guess you could say. Over the past couple of years, they had paid out close to $100,000 in claims. So now they started, these insurance companies and the police started taking an even closer look. Some companies even contacted the prosecutor. They really wanted him arrested because to them, it was obvious that he was running a scam and they were having to pay for it.
Right.
Pioneer Insurance Company and some others refused to issue any policies anymore, especially after there was policies on the Reverend's mother. And they found out that the doctor who was listed on the application didn't even have a record of ever treating an Ada Maxwell.
Oh, goodness.
And so that raised flags, and they were able to get some policies canceled that way because they were able to prove that he was lying. Again, Dorcas had been busy since marrying the Reverend, and I don't know how much she would have known about everything going on. I don't know if he kept her in the dark or if she just blindly trusted him. I'm not sure. But 6 months after they got married, she gave birth to their son.
Wait, how many months?
6.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Now, I think her husband had died already by the time she got pregnant, but she was clearly pregnant long before they got married. From the outside looking in, again, everything seemed good with the family. Then about 8 months after the death of his brother, tragedy would strike again.
Say it ain't so.
Oh, it's so. September 20th in 1972, 3 men were driving along Highway 9 in Nicksburg when they noticed there was a car sitting alongside the road. The engine was on. It was idling. Headlights were still on. So they pull over to check it out. And when they looked inside, they saw a woman slumped over in the front seat. So, of course, they realized something's wrong. They rushed to a grocery store and called the police. When the officers arrived on the scene, they saw that the car's windshield was cracked toward the bottom. And it looked like the vehicle may have been involved in some kind of a small fender bender. But again, the damage was minor. Nothing about the scene suggested a serious accident. But inside the car, investigators found Dorcas Anderson Maxwell's body.
And it's just so similar to that first wife's, how they found her.
Yep, she was laying across the front seat. Her head was laying in the driver's side. There were some strange details that came out when the coroner examined her body. For instance, there were leaves stuck to the bottom of her sandals, which meant she'd likely been outside the vehicle at some point. She had a few small cuts on her shoulders and elbows and a large cut above her right eye, but none of the injuries were enough to explain her death. When the toxicology reports came back, they did not find anything that would point to poison or an overdose. The coroner did find that Dorcas had a fractured hyoid bone, and that bone is located in the neck and can be an indicator of strangulation. But it can also be broken during an autopsy. I think especially back then, that may not happen as often now. So authorities, they weren't able to definitively say that strangulation had been the cause of her death.
That had to be so frustrating for the police because it's so similar to that other one that he's already gotten away with. It's almost like he's just playing a game with them.
100%. And without a clear cause of death,
they can't do anything.
What can they do? And so the final ruling was that Dorcas had died from respiratory distress at 28 years old with no history of asthma or breathing problems. And her cause of death was basically an asthma attack.
Wow.
Yeah. So another sudden death, another insurance policy. Well, actually 17 insurance policies were found.
You're kidding.
No. In total, they were worth up to about $100,000. And with the help of his lawyer, he actually collected about $80,000 of it.
So his lawyer's in on this because how can you not know what kind of a scam this guy's running?
And okay, so by this point, you can imagine there's not many churches that are wanting the Reverend Maxwell preaching from their pulpits.
Hope not.
His reputation was shot and people were terrified of him.
Yeah.
Now they were convinced because how was he getting by with this? But the Reverend, in true narcissistic fashion, kept his head held high. He continued dressing sharply, always well put together, always presenting, always just ever confident, and just kept right on going. And just 2 years after the death of his second wife, and only 3 years after the death of his first wife, he married again.
And I'm thinking these women who are marrying him,
are they out of their minds?
They've got to be. They have got to be. Like, who in their right mind?
Oh, well, Miss Ophelia Burns, the woman who had been indicted as his accomplice in the murder of Mary Lou. That's who was crazy enough to do it.
So, okay. So she was with him during that point, but then he didn't marry her then. He married Dorcas.
Well, I believe he married Dorcas. I think, okay, so if this lady Ophelia is helping him, he probably told her, like, last long.
Give me a year.
Yes. Because literally, she was dead within a year.
Yeah.
And had she not been pregnant, I'm sure she would have died before that.
Right. That's right. Wow. And he's feeling pretty confident that he can keep getting away with this because he 100%. Has so far.
Yeah. So he
feels untouchable.
Ophelia had been married before, but her husband divorced her because she was caught cheating on him with the Reverend. And their family situation was, so he was raising his youngest son by Dorcas. Her two boys that he'd adopted, they were being raised by their grandmother, and his daughter that he had legitimized.
Yes.
She was being raised by her mother. And Ophelia, she also had kids, but they were older and out of the house. But she did have one girl she was raising, Shirley Ann Ellington, and she'd had her years before the Reverend, even while she was with her first husband, basically since she was a baby. Around this time, the Reverend decided to take up some regular, honest work. He had purchased some land and was working in pulpwood. One of the young men who worked on his crew was his nephew. A lot of people stayed away from him, and I can see why. But of course, his reputation went before him. But they were saying that he was so likable that all they had to do was take him to the people's house and be like, this is what has been said about him, and would have him just explain it all to the customers. And they would be like, he's such a nice guy.
And they'd fall for it.
And they would fall for it.
Wow, that's crazy.
And they said that the white residents actually really liked him and really trusted him way more than the black residents because they knew. So the people around town loved him. Okay. So anyway, he's, taking up this work, and one of the people that worked for him was his nephew, and his name was James Hicks, and he wasn't afraid of him. They had a pretty good relationship. He was the son of his oldest sister. James was just 22 years old. He was only about 120 pounds. Just this little bitty man, I guess. He worked for his uncle for a while, but eventually he ended up getting married and got a job at a mill in Alexander City, but he still lived near his uncle in Nicksburg. But on February the 14th, Valentine's Day in 1976, James Hicks went missing. 2 days later, in the early morning hours, a woman would call the funeral home in Alexander City and ask them to send somebody out to Highway 9. She didn't give her name, and the funeral home thought it was a prank. They just weren't used to that, so they didn't even bother going out to look. But then this woman called back again, and so this time they were like, well, let's go out there and just see what's going on. By the time they got there, James had already been found dead inside his car. His vehicle was located sitting along the shoulder of Highway 9, the very same highway that Dorcas had been found, and right near where the Reverend was still living with his new wife, Ophelia. When the police got there, they saw that familiar sight, the 1968 Pontiac Firebird that James had been driving that night, did not appear to have any real damage to it. Definitely had not been wrecked. And it looked like it had been parked. The pine trees nearby showed no signs of being hit. But inside the vehicle, James Hicks lay lifeless. There were no signs of trauma that could explain his death. It was just crazy. Jimmy Bailey, the county coroner, decided to contact the district attorney, who ordered a more thorough investigation because they knew like something is going on here. Medical examiners from the state crime lab conducted his autopsy. It was the middle of February, and James was still wearing his blue jean jacket and jeans. He still had on his class ring from Coosa County High School. He had a few small cuts on his arms and legs, a little injury on his lip. He had a little bit of caffeine and a little bit of alcohol in his system, but I mean, very little. Like, he wouldn't have even been arrested for driving impaired. Just nothing that would explain why a healthy 22-year-old man had suddenly died. It was just crazy. But of course, there were several insurance policies that had been taken out on James Hicks. And once again, the beneficiary was the Reverend. When investigators interviewed James Hicks's widow, she did not hesitate and immediately said the Reverend had somehow killed her husband. She said that she'd found out that Ophelia had been calling around to different family members trying to find out James's social security number. Mm-hmm. She felt like it was obvious that they were trying to take out a life insurance policy or policies on him.
Yes.
She also told investigators that her dad had overheard somebody bragging that there was $38,000 worth of insurance out on James. And then something even more scary came to light. There was this man named Aaron Burton, and he told authorities that just weeks before James's death, that the Reverend had approached him in a grocery store and asked him to come to the side, said he wanted to talk to him. And he tried to hire him to help murder not just James, but also another nephew as well, James's brother. Burton said that the Reverend was mad because he claimed that the boys owed him money and he was just tired of fooling with them. So he offered Burton $4,000 to carry out the murders. Well, actually $4,000 for each murder. The conversation lasted nearly an hour, and at that time he agreed to do it.
Oh, okay.
And then they met again. And during that second meeting, the Reverend drove him down Highway 9, the same road where these bodies had already been found, and showed the exact location where he wanted the murders to take place. The Reverend said that Burton could hide in the woods and wait, and then when James arrived, the Reverend would distract him, and Burton could approach him from behind and they could strangle him. He pulled out 2 gloves and said, if you use these, there won't be any fingerprints. And after seeing the gloves and how serious the Reverend was, he told him, look, I can't do it. I'm just not interested in murdering those boys. And he said the Reverend at first tried to talk him back into it and then offered him money to keep quiet. But Burton told him he didn't want any part of it and he didn't need to be paid anything to keep quiet. He was probably scared.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because it's like this guy's invincible. He obviously, I can see why they might have thought it was voodoo.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of explanation for how they're dying and how he's getting away with everything.
Right. And then the next week, James Hicks was found dead. Burton said that after James's body was found, the Reverend went to his house and talked to his dad and his brother and warned them both that they needed to make sure that Burton kept his mouth shut, pretty much threatening him.
Right.
Burton also told investigators about another young guy named Calvin Edwards, who had also worked on the Reverend's pulpwooding crew, and he suggested that they go talk to him as well. So they did, and he told them that about a year before James died, the Reverend had bailed him out of the Coosa County Jail in Rockford and offered him some work on his crew. And so he did gladly. I mean, he was getting out of jail free, literally. But he said immediately the Reverend started asking questions, trying to feel him out to see if he would be willing to
commit murder.
Just kind of seeing where he was at with him. But then eventually he was just complaining about his nephews, saying they owed him money, that their deaths could solve a lot of his problems. But then he just came straight out and said that if he would help him murder the boys, that within a few months of their deaths, he would collect insurance money and he could pay $4,000 for each nephew. The investigators said they would not have even believed this had they not already talked to the first guy.
Really?
Yeah, because it was just crazy. There was so much. Their stories were really lining up. He even described how the murders could be carried out. He said he also had some pills that he could put into a little bit of whiskey to make them dizzy. And the plan was for the nephews to be given alcohol. So this young guy would take them out, give them some alcohol. And when they became disoriented, he would take them to a meeting place, which was actually a church of all places.
He has no fear of God.
None. And the Reverend would be waiting for him there. And then he would handle the rest. He was like, you don't have to do anything. I'm going to smother them and make it look like an accident. And he said that he was going to run the vehicle off of a cliff near Elam Church. But proving that James was murdered was now all but impossible because the coroner had listed his cause of death as natural.
Oh my gracious.
I can't imagine how frustrated their community must have been.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
fearful, frustrated.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all of those things.
Yeah. I can imagine that they were livid.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were afraid of him. So they feared him.
Right.
But what could they really do?
And justice is not happening.
No.
And so, that's horrible.
It is. Meanwhile, the Reverend and his wife, Ophelia, had her adopted daughter, Shirley Ann, living with them. And she was about 16 years old at this time. And like most 16-year-olds, she'd started pushing boundaries, having an attitude, that kind of thing. What teenager doesn't do that? She didn't help around the house anymore. Duh. And was only happy when she got her way. I'm thinking, you're literally describing every teenager.
Yeah.
After finishing her sophomore year of high school, Shirley Ann started working as a waitress at a Hardee's in Alexander City. For some reason, this case feels so old, and it's really not. It's old.
The 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it kind of feels like the 40s and
yes,
50s.
because these names like Dorcas and Ophelia,
yes.
These are the older names. And
when you think about it, the people, the main characters of the story, they're born in the 20s. And so I guess you're carried through some decades.
Yeah.
So she would have been born in the 50s.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Shirley Ann didn't have her driver's license. And so she relied on everybody else, her friends and family, to take her where she needed to go. On the second Saturday in June of 1977, Ophelia drove Shirley Ann to visit one of her sisters in Perryville. On the way home, they stopped and got an ice cream, and then they got back home at around 7 that evening. But Shirley didn't want to stay home. She wanted to go back out. Ophelia told her the car's about out of gas, and she tried to avoid an argument and just said, hey, wait for the Reverend to get home and we'll figure it out. So the Reverend was out, which it seems late for him to be out doing his pulpwood stuff, but apparently he was out doing that. And so she said that Shirley Ann got in the car and just took off anyway. This was his car, the Reverend's car that she got into. And Ophelia said she didn't see exactly where she went, but she thought she'd be headed back to Perryville towards her sister's house. She said she was livid, but decided just let her go. She'll be back. She's left before and she'll come back.
Well, wherever she went, I'm almost positive she took Highway 9.
Well, you'll see. So she was waiting for her sister to call to let her know that Shirley Ann had got there, but she never called. So eventually, Ophelia called the police to report her missing. And when the Reverend got back home, they went out to search together. They stopped by the Alexander City Police Station. And that's when they were directed to a stretch of Highway 9, about a mile from their home. I
didn't see that coming.
Nope. When the Maxwells arrived, they would only let Ophelia come up to the vehicle. They told him, the Reverend, not to get out of the car, that the situation did not involve him and that he needed to stay away from the scene. At first glance, it looked like the front tire on the driver's side had gone flat. And investigators initially, at first glance, thought that she might have been trying to change the tire herself using a jack and an iron, because that's what it looked like. They thought maybe the car had slipped from the jack and fallen onto her. But when they got to look at closer, they realized the tire wasn't even flat. That was the first thing. Shirley Ann's hands were clean, and
oh yeah,
what it's like when you work with a tire. And the other thing is, this is a 16-year-old girl. She's only a mile from home. She would not have changed that tire.
Yes, exactly right.
I'm a 48-year-old woman, and I wouldn't have changed the tire. I would have, no. So it just didn't make sense. People were shocked and devastated. The community was just in utter disbelief. The Reverend was getting away with murdering anybody he wanted to, and they fully believed that he had murdered this little girl. The 16-year-old girl that everybody loved. She was apparently a good girl. So the police, again, they're like, no, this is just not right. The day before Father's Day, which was Saturday, June 18th, 1977, the Reverend and Ophelia walked into the funeral home and sat near the front of the chapel. The room was full of people, somewhere between 500 and 600 people there. It was a hot June day, and the mourners are, fanning themselves with paper fans, and you could hear people audibly crying out loud. Up at the front of the chapel, Shirley Ann lay in an open casket, and the atmosphere was just thick. Once everybody was seated, the Reverend E.B. Burpo Jr. from Great Bethel Baptist Church started the service by reminding everybody that death comes for everybody, young and old, expected and unexpected. And he talked about how preparation was wise and necessary. And then he talked about Shirley Ann and what a bright, warm, loving, and energetic person she was. How she was going to be missed, how loved she was, but about the blessing that she was fully at peace. What do you say?
Right.
That would be a
very hard,
tough job, because really your job is to bring comfort to
the family,
the mourners. Yeah. And to honor the deceased. So after the service, the mourners are making their way toward the front to view her body and to say their final goodbyes. Ophelia was just overcome with emotion when it was her turn to walk up to the casket, and she had to be helped back to her seat. So the Reverend took her back, to the third pew where they were sitting, and she just laid her head against his shoulder and sobbed. Shirley Ann's sister, Lavinia, said that she looked at her sister and it just didn't even look like her. And she said seeing her little sister so young, and she would look back at the Reverend and he wasn't crying. He didn't even seem like he was shaken or bothered. And he was just calm as he could be. And so in this moment of like utter rage, she pointed at him and she screamed, "You killed my sister and you're going to pay for it." And I'm sure everybody in the chapel was like, oh my gosh. But before anybody could really react, there was this man wearing a green suit, and he was in the pew directly in front of the Reverend. And he stood up and pulled out a pistol from his pocket and fired 3 shots directly into the Reverend Willie Maxwell's head. The gunman, like I said, was so close he could have reached out and touched him.
Wow.
And just like that, he was dead.
Well, he had that coming.
He did. But as you can imagine, the funeral home, or everybody in it, people were screaming.
Yeah, it's pure chaos, I'm sure.
Chairs are being knocked over. They're crying. Just these loud cries and screams, and pictures are falling off the walls, and handkerchiefs are being strewn about. It's just chaotic. By the time the police arrived, the shooter actually had already surrendered to 2 black police officers who had been there to direct traffic for the funeral. So he wasn't trying to get away. He went over to them, and on the way to the police station, he confessed everything. His brother was a police officer, and they called his brother over there, and he's like, "Why did you do it?" And he said, "I had to." And he said, "And if I had it to do over again, I would do it again."
Because it not only is they were not going to see any justice, but how many more people would die?
The crazy thing was, some people saw him as a hero. Others saw him as a cold-blooded killer. And it depended on who you ask. Just a week after his stepdaughter's funeral, in the middle of June in 1977, the Reverend Willie Maxwell's own funeral was being held. They had to have security there. It was wild. And it took place in the very same chapel where he had been gunned down.
Oh, that's wild.
Reporters are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The funeral home is just crowded with people. I feel like a lot of people came out of morbid curiosity and not really to mourn.
I'm sure there were a fair amount of those, yeah.
But when Ophelia was interviewed, she said her husband had been innocent of everything, and she was just living in a nightmare.
I totally think it had something to do with every one of those. I really do.
Me too. I do too. The Reverend left behind children. He left behind grandchildren, his mother, his sisters, brothers, nieces, nephews, and a lot of them had actually just witnessed his murder inside that funeral home. And he also did have friends, church friends, and fellow mill workers, and just people in the community who felt like he had been a victim of vicious rumors, and now he was the victim of a public and horribly violent murder. Some of his friends worried that the publicity surrounding the case was just making it worse for him. And one of his relatives said that she was sick and tired of hearing the word voodoo, and that the family was going to sue any reporter who printed anything sensational like that, which they did. So trust me, they printed it. I read a lot of newspaper articles, and voodoo was all through those articles. But let's get back to Robert Burns. This is the defendant. And Robert Burns was actually the brother of Ophelia's first husband.
Okay.
So before Ophelia ever married the Reverend, she and her first husband had raised Shirley Ann together. So Shirley Ann was Robert Burns's niece. And by all accounts, he was very close to her. So he had served in the military for a while. And when he got back home, he got married and built this quiet life centered around his family and work. And he was married and helped raise his wife's 2 kids. And then they also had a foster child who was blind and deaf. And Shirley Ann would take care of her a lot for them.
Yeah.
So she babysat. She was just around a lot.
Yeah.
There were a few of the sisters, and I guess different relatives were raising them, but he was pretty close to all of them. This was just really shocking to everybody. Nobody would have thought that he would have done something like this, but family was so important to him. And he was known to be, like I said, especially close to his nieces and nephews, and especially Shirley. He cared about all of them and stayed involved in her life even when she moved with Ophelia and the Reverend. So when Shirley Ann died under those circumstances, it was just another tragedy. And this was his family.
Right.
And then comes one of the craziest twists in this entire story. The man who agreed to represent him was the very same lawyer who had represented the Reverend Willie Maxwell for years, which was Tom Radney. Yes. He had stood beside the Reverend through lawsuits, investigations, the murder trial for Mary Lou. He'd represented, or was going to represent, Ophelia. He'd fought these insurance companies on his behalf, argued in court for him, defended him.
Listen, Tom Radney is going to go where the money's at. That's all I can figure for him.
But I mean, how much money could this guy have had?
Well, that's true. I don't know, but
I think, though, that he was I think he wanted this was a sensational case.
Oh, he was wanting
that notoriety. Absolutely.
Oh, that makes more sense than the money. You're right. Yeah.
Now, I think with the Reverend, the money. Well, he got plenty of money.
He was opportunistic.
Absolutely.
He saw an opportunity and he took it.
You just can't make this stuff.
No, you can't.
Up.
You can't.
So this same attorney who had once worked to protect the Reverend was now working to defend the man who shot him. So Radney had seen the pattern, though, of deaths up close. He knew about the insurance policies. Of course, he knew about all the suspicion, because I feel like his fellow lawyers were really frustrated with him for continuing to support the Reverend.
Right.
Now, he did say, because they found out the Reverend would have definitely been charged with murder in the case of Shirley Ann, because her death was ruled a homicide.
Okay.
So she'd been strangled.
But what I don't understand is how he was able to represent the defendant now, because that is definitely a conflict of interest.
It really is.
Just because he does have all of that information about his former client.
Yes. I'm sure that wouldn't happen today.
Oh, I don't think so.
But it sure did then. He knew he needed a new client. And Robert Burns needed a defense, and he knew it wasn't going to be an easy case, which I 100% believe that's why he took it. I think he wanted to make a name for himself. And now you see why this case was so captivating to Harper Lee.
Yes.
The trial was never about who did it, because they knew who did it. It was about intent and the law. The prosecution argued that this was murder, plain and simple. No matter what, it was an open and shut case. They said that Robert Burns had brought a gun to the funeral, and they felt like that showed intent right there. They argued that no matter what suspicions surrounded the Reverend, that Burns had no right to take someone's life. And they argued that people can't just decide for themselves who deserves to live or die. And that's a valid argument.
That is true.
It is. But for the defense, Radney didn't try to argue that Burns didn't murder the Reverend. Everybody knew he had. But he focused on why he did it. He argued that Robert Burns had just buried a young girl that he loved almost like a daughter, that after years of fear, frustration, and anger had built up in that community, emotions were running extremely high. Radney argued that Burns believed no one was stopping what was happening in their community, and he believed that he was protecting his family.
And I can certainly see that angle.
Yeah. And that in that moment, he was overwhelmed by grief and emotion. There were lots of testimonies about voodoo, how the people were so afraid of the Reverend and believed that he was practicing and casting spells on people. There was also firsthand testimony of people that he had tried to hire to murder other people. Then there was the state medical examiner who testified that Shirley had definitely been murdered and had died by suffocation. So I think that's how he was suffocating them.
Okay.
But they did find black powder in his pocket. And during the trial, they hadn't known yet what it was. And I'm not sure that they ever found out. So I did feel like that was a very interesting fact.
Well, and he had said something earlier about giving them something to make them dizzy.
Yes.
So if he could get them disoriented, it'd be much easier to smother them at that point. They can't fight back.
Well, I always wondered, I think he was giving them some kind of a drug. But I wondered if he was telling people it wasn't some kind of a voodoo thing.
Oh.
And that's how all that got started.
Oh, I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Robert Burns' wife got on the stand and she testified that, yes, he had brought a gun there, to the funeral home, but he took it to church. He took his gun everywhere. He had not planned to kill him that day. She argued that when her niece had that outburst, it just did something to him. Not that it was her fault, but that he was probably feeling the same way. Mm-hmm. And he just lost it. He literally had a temporary lapse of judgment or was insane temporarily or whatever. In the end, Robert Louis Burns was found innocent by reason of insanity in the murder.
I'm so surprised. I mean, I think, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not mad about it.
He was admitted to Bryce Mental Hospital after almost a 5-hour deliberation. And I'll tell you what, how that ended up happening was because the jury had slipped a note to the judge asking him, if we find him innocent, what's going to happen to him? If we find him guilty, what's going to happen? They were trying to fill it out. And the judge was like, you cannot take those things into consideration.
Right.
You have to judge the case and you have to, make your decision that way. And so his lawyer, Radney, suggested, why don't you send him to Burns this mental hospital to be evaluated for the sake of the jury. And that's what happened.
That's interesting.
And maybe they felt like he needed to. I think they felt sorry for him. I think by the end of it, they really liked this guy.
Okay.
After all that, Burns broke down and put his head in his hands and just cried and cried. And so did his wife. Their family and friends and well-wishers came up and congratulated him and hugged him and shook his hand. Now, the Reverend's widow wasn't in the courtroom when the verdict was read. She did sit at the prosecutor's table during the trial and listen to testimony. It was only a 2-day trial. But he was released and they did take him directly over to Bryce Hospital. But it didn't take a few weeks. And the staff, they were like, he's not insane, actually, and nor was he even temporarily insane. But there was this doctor, a Dr. Gunnels, and she was a woman, and she later said that killing Willie Maxwell was the most sane thing anybody had done all summer. She said there wasn't a jury in the county that was going to convict him for what he had done because the law ought to have done it sooner. And then she said, I probably would have killed him myself.
See, I agree with her.
Yes.
I do agree with her.
And that is the story of
the wild, wild story.
Yes.
Of
the Reverend.
Wow.
So It does bring up a lot of ethical questions.
Right. Because obviously we know you can't just take justice into your own hands. But I still agree with that nurse. Like, honestly, it had to be done. And if the state or whoever was not going to do it, then okay, I'm sorry. I wouldn't put that guy away either.
I know it's so hard because I'm not a black and white person. Like, I don't think
you see all these levels of gray.
Yeah, I don't think that way. But in the law, should it be black and white though? You know what I mean? Like when it comes to the law,
I don't think it can be.
I don't personally either. I don't think anything can be.
Yeah.
I mean, well, some things can be. I mean, I guess there is right and wrong. Murder is wrong. But then you think about like Bonhoeffer.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was in on a plot to kill Hitler. And he loved the Lord, I believe, with everything in him.
Yeah. And in a way, I feel like, I mean, that guy probably saved a lot of other lives.
Oh, I 100% believe so.
So I feel like that's a self-defense. Like, biblically, I feel like there could be a case made that he was defending other people from a murderer who had gotten away with it multiple times and would have continued until who knows when.
Right.
So I don't know that, I mean, I kind of feel like you could make a case for that biblically.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now that I've said that, I'm never really going to get on a jury for sure.
If there's a guy with a machine gun out on a playground and you take him out, are you really committing murder?
Yeah, that's pretty compelling.
That is compelling, and that could be used as an argument for this other case too.
Yeah, I think so. There was a mom years ago who I'm pretty sure she was in court and she shot the sexual abuser of her child because they were getting ready to get away with it. They didn't get a good a sentence that was sufficient for what they had done to her child. She shot him. Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? I don't blame her. I mean, I don't think she did anything wrong by killing this person.
No.
So, I mean, I know. Well, we'll probably get some heat for this one. We'll have to, y'all go ahead and leave us some comments in the group what you think about this.
Yeah.
Those were some hard times.
Yes, they were.
From everyone here at Hard Times and True Crimes, we'd like to let all of you know that we appreciate your listener support. But the best way to guarantee that you never have to miss the sound of my voice is to make sure you download every episode of Hard Times and True Crimes. Like it, share it, subscribe, and tell everybody you know, and the few people you don't, to check us out. Till next time, goodbye.